For more on this, I'm joined now by Jonathan Lis, also in London. He's a political commentator and journalist. Jonathan, I was reading one tweet from somebody in the UK who said it's both odd and sad. I can't figure out which one's worse. How would you describe this day for you?
It is incredibly surreal. Anyone who lives in Britain, has lived in Britain, their whole lives, as I have, you think about what would happen when the Queen dies, and you can't really picture it because she's just always been there. There are very few people in Britain who can remember what it was like not to have a Queen, because obviously the last time a monarch died was 1952. So all this feels very new, and we don't know what's going to happen next. Obviously, the Queen was just a human being, and Britain will carry on. But what she represented was such a broad sweep of Britain's history, and her death comes at such a tumultuous moment for modern Britain, with so many crises, so much upheaval politically, socially, economically, that her death leaves a real sense of uncertainty, a kind of foreboding, if you like, that Britain is a country that has lost its way, that doesn't know where it's going. And one of the people that helped keep it together has now gone.
You talked about the broad sweep. It's interesting, Prime Minister Liz Truss just met with her just a couple of days ago. I imagine she never imagined a couple days later she'd have to come out and give a speech to the nation, which she did. And you pointed out it's quite a break from her because as a teenager, she was against the monarchy. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's quite amusing, actually, in a way, that Liz Truss's most famous moment, one of her most famous moments, came when she was 19. And she gave a speech to the Liberal Democrat conference, a party that she left a couple of years later, where she denounced the monarchy and said that it was unfair and disgraceful, and that one family alone should supply the head of state. And I thought it was interesting that 28 years later, the same Liz Truss is now standing outside on 10 Downing Street saying, "God save the King," and talking about what a personal inspiration the Queen has been to her. That, I suspect, I doubt a little bit, given that she was so fervently against the monarchy. But it does show that when you're the Prime Minister, you have certain responsibilities, regardless of your personal beliefs.
As Andrew Wilson pointed out, she traveled the globe. There's pictures of her back in 1986 in China among the terracotta warriors. She went to the Great Wall of China. She saw leaders from Deng Xiaoping to Xi Jinping. Talk about her efforts on the world stage. I mean, if you were a world leader, at some point you would rub shoulders with her, and she always seemed to kind of handle these with such grace.
I suppose you could think of the Queen as being the elder stateswoman of the entire world, in the sense that she was the longest serving monarch. She had kind of outlasted anyone else. Everyone wanted to kind of be in her orbit, if you like, to get the stardust from her, because she just seemed to transcend the monarchy almost, seemed to transcend Britain. And she was a gifted diplomat. She really understood politics, she understood world affairs. She lived through the Second World War. She gave her first sort of national address in 1940. And so everyone could draw on this incredible breadth of experience and history that she had. But she also was a diplomat in her own right. And one very key example of that was in 2011, when she paid a state visit to Ireland, a country which had had terrible relations with Britain and a very sort of raw colonial history. And a state visit was unthinkable for much of the Queen's reign. But the steady diplomacy between those two countries, the thawing of relations, made it possible. And then the Queen went to Dublin and she visited the memorial to Irish freedom fighters. And a lot of Irish people talked about how moved they were by that, about how the Queen, whose grandparents and great ancestors had been, had been the rulers of Ireland against the Irish people's will, and now she was helping to heal some of those old wounds.
Jonathan, there's an op-ed piece in the New York Times today that says, "Mourn the Queen, not her empire," and it talks about how Charles might be able to take the monarchy in a different direction, more in line with what we see in Scandinavia. Do you think that's going to be the case? I know that there's been kind of among young people in the UK kind of a turn away from the monarchy. What's your sense about that?
Certainly, we'll be going to a less deferential monarchy. King Charles, it's strange to say King Charles. King Charles doesn't have the same kind of, I suppose, gravitas or magic that his mother did for obvious reasons. But I think that he'll certainly be a less political king than he was a prince. So he'll certainly continue that. But yes, I think there's already an effort to slim down the royal family, to make it sort of more transparent, if you like, to make it a little bit more down to earth. But the problem with that is that if you kind of make the monarchy too transparent and too ordinary, if you like, then you also lose the reason for having it, which is that it's meant to be slightly above the country. It's meant to be a little bit like a fairy tale. It's meant to have a bit of magic in the old expression. And so there will have to be a balance between keeping it real and accountable and transparent, but also not sort of revealing too much and normalizing it too much in a way that makes people wonder why we have to have it.
Jonathan Lis, thank you again for your observations from the UK. I appreciate it.